It's likely the most loaded term in the partisan debate over the Russia investigation, the Steele dossier. And it's one element of the highly classified documents that were just released by the FBI, laying out the FISA warrant request for surveillance of a former Trump campaign advisor, Carter Page. And it was just released this weekend. The president wasting no time, though, to hammer the FBI over this, claiming that DOJ misled courts in the Russia investigation by using the controversial Steele dossier as a factor for the surveillance of Page. Senator Lindsey Graham seems to agree.
In my view, that the FISA warrant process needs to be looked at closely by Congress. The main reason they issued the warrant was the dossier prepared by Mr. Steele. The substance of the dossier to this day is a bunch of garbage.
But not everyone in the president's party is in lockstep here. Listen.
I don't think they did anything wrong. I think they went to the court. They got the judges to approve it. They laid out all the information, and there was a lot of reasons unrelated to the dossier for why they wanted to look at Carter Page.
All right, joining me right now is Jonathan Weiner. He's a former senior official at the State Department. He's known Christopher Steele for years. He was responsible for writing a 2-page summary of the dossier's contents, sharing it with the State Department officials, including former Secretary of State John Kerry. Jonathan, thanks for coming in.
Sure, glad to be here.
So you heard Lindsey Graham. Let's just start there. Lindsey Graham calls the substance of the dossier garbage. What do you say?
I'd say that an awful lot of material in the dossier has been corroborated by events and information that we've come to see since. Other parts are still unknown whether they're going to be corroborated or not. Major elements of the dossier, I don't know any that have been disproven. And
you have known Christopher Steele for years. You wrote very publicly in an op-ed the relationship, how you came about the information in the dossier, and so on and so forth. Do you trust his information over the years?
Well, while I was at the State Department, he provided me some 120 documents about Russia and Ukraine, entirely unrelated to the U.S. political system. It wasn't about Democrats or Republicans or anything partisan. It was about what Russia was doing in the national security area that was relevant to the United States. These documents were well received by the people who were doing Russia full-time within the Department of State, and that's why I continue to provide them. He did it because he felt it was information the United States government should have. Similarly, when he developed the information relating to 2016 and Russia's assault on our democracy and interference in our elections, he felt it was important that the U.S. government be aware of it. I did too.
And what has anything that's happened between 2016 and 2018 changed your view?
I think what we've seen from 2016 to 2018 is a lot of facts that have tended to further corroborate the concerns I had when I was first exposed to the material that was included later on in the dossier. We've just seen an awful lot, and we need to understand more. I mean, for example, when President Trump said, "Russia, are you listening? I think you'll be mightily rewarded if we can get Hillary's 30,000 emails," he said, by the press, mightily rewarded. Was that some kind of signaling? Was that candidate Trump saying, "I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message"? Some kind of communication from the Trump campaign to Putin and the Kremlin? We don't know the answer to that. It's important that we get the answers to these kinds of questions.
Jonathan, when it comes to the dossier, its role in the FISA warrant application and its role in kind of the partisan fight that has played out since its existence became known, do you question its accuracy?
The accuracy of what, please?
Of the dossier.
The core of the dossier, which is that the Russians had a plan to interfere with American elections in 2016, has been borne out by lots and lots of information. They've been doing it in other countries as well. They did it in Brexit. They've done it in Germany. They've done it in France. They did it in Barcelona. This is what the Russians under President Putin are doing in elections in other countries. And I'm confident it took place in the United States.
One of the arguments that I hear from folks who don't trust the document, don't trust the dossier, is that some of the information got to the FBI came from a Clinton associate that you talked to, Sid Blumenthal. What do you say to that?
It's not true.
Explain, please.
Christopher Steele wrote the elements of the dossier, independent of any information received from material that I sent him after having read the dossier. The materials that were in the dossier were created before I shared the information, except I think for one memo that came in November or December. Already had been written before he ever saw it. So the chronology is wrong. It's just a crazy idea. It's conspiracy theory stuff. It's an effort to muddy up the record. It's untrue. It didn't happen.
On the simple fact, Jonathan, that this marks the first time that a FISA request has been released publicly, what impact do you think that has?
Well, it will further encourage U.S. law enforcement agencies to make sure they have, the Justice Department, to make sure that FISA applications are very strong, and that when judges decide to authorize listening in on an American because of concerns that he's a foreign spy, that the documentation is very robust. It seems to me that the documentation here is likely very robust, but it's hard to know what's in back of it because so much of it is properly blacked out. And we really don't want, in general, a lot of public discussion, I would think, of exceptions to our wiretap laws for listening in to people who are believed to be recruited or in the process of being recruited by a foreign government. That's not something you really want to have play out in public. You don't want the foreign governments getting lots and lots of information about what we know about it.
Separately, related, but however, quite separately, you're actually on Vladimir Putin's list of people he'd like to interrogate if given the opportunity, if there was this deal that was much discussed, obviously, last week, that he would be able to interrogate Americans, if Mueller would be able to go over and interrogate Russians with regard to his Russia investigation about the election hack. The White House now says that it disagrees with Putin's request. They're not going to go along with it after leaving the door open last week. Does that bring you comfort?
I was never worried. Our laws wouldn't have allowed it in the first place. We don't have an extradition agreement with Russia, and the Mutual Legal Assistance Agreement creates an exception for political cases. And when a president is asked by a foreign buddy, will you interview people for me? These are people I want to go after. That's not the way the system is supposed to work. That's not the way it does work. It's not the way it can work.
Jonathan Weiner, thanks for coming in.